Hey everyone, you're listening to InfoQuench with Jeff.
And Amy. We're chatting about how to get the most out of life.
And covering a ton of interesting topics.
So there's sure to be something.
For just about everyone. Let's get to it. Hey everybody, and welcome to InfoQuench. I'm your host, Jeff.
And I'm Amy.
And first, right off the bat, we would just like to say thank you to everybody who picked up the podcast after our little hiatus and, gave us some listens. It really means a lot to us. We've said this before that we do this just for fun, just, because we're a husband-wife team. It's just our outlet, and so when other people really enjoy the podcast, it's such a bonus.
Absolutely. It's our creative outlet, and we're just thankful that people picked up the listening. We're seeing the downloads, and it's awesome.
Yeah,
Truly
we caught
awesome.
the bug again, and we're really enjoying getting back to everything. So what's this? I don't even know what this podcast is about. As usual,
That's an excellent question, Jeff.
Why am I even here, honey?
This podcast is going to be a little bit about two things. One is the Japanese concept of Ikigai. Ikigai. And then how that relates to the 10 things that the world's longest living people do.
Oh, isn't there like a documentary sort of series special on Netflix about that?
Well, I think there's been a few around blue zones and the idea of having a high percentage of the population that live over the age of 100. So yeah. I think it's very popular. I know I personally am completely sucked into anything that is about living longer, or those tips from the 100-plus-year-olds where people are like, what do you do? Did you smoke? Did you drink?
Yeah.
Well, there's also the whole idea of health span versus lifespan. So traditionally we would talk about lifespan, just how many years you're around. But now people are talking more and more about health span and how many of those years are with a very good quality of life. There's a great book called Outlive, and I read that. It was very research heavy, a lot of science in it. But
you talked to me a lot about the books that you're reading as you're reading them, but I don't remember that one. No. When did you read this?
When?
Like recently?
Yeah, it was in the fall, I think.
Okay.
Yep.
Did we talk about it? And I just don't remember? Probably.
We probably didn't. We didn't talk about it on a podcast, I don't think. But maybe you just tune me out when I talk about books now.
No, I don't try to do that. I like to talk to you about the books you're reading. But
this just that the content doesn't really stick.
Yeah, I guess so. What are you reading now?
I've got a few on the go on my Kindle.
All right.
So before we jump into the topic of the episode, Jeff and I had this discussion around how we refer to the years basically that are beyond the millennium, because it's really easy to say the 1980s or the 1920s. But I find that, and I don't know, listeners, if you have a similar issue, but I have a problem when I'm trying to refer to the period of 2000 to 2010.
I just say early 2000s.
But that could fall in the range of 2010 to 2020. Do you say 2010s?
Yeah.
You say the 2010s.
Around the 2010s, yeah.
I've never said that. Those words have not escaped my lips before.
It's not too often, though, I really have to refer to that time period. But if I did, I probably would say 2010s. And then the early 2000s would be, from 2000 to 2010.
Well, I mean, if we make it to like the 2040s, 2050s, then we'll be more apt to have to narrow down the time frame that we're talking about, right?
Remember how crazy people were about things turning to 2000?
Oh, I know. It's so funny. Jeff dug up this old computer from the basement, and one of the warning messages that popped up on it was around the idea of software messing up because of the date being a little bit too late. Now, I think it was pretty close to the Y2K era, but that was the warning, which tells you how long this computer has been with Jeff.
Yeah, it's an old eMac, which I think came out in like 2006 or whatever. But I don't even remember how I got it, but I'm trying to get rid of it. So.
Yeah, you're in full-on decluttering mode. We are moving stuff out of the house.
The next phase of the house is the basement, so I got to get all the crap out of there that we don't want.
And since we're just like not even getting into the topic yet, let's talk about what we're watching.
Let's talk
about Paul Giamatti. I was listening to Paul Giamatti on Marc Maron because he was promoting his new movie, The Holdovers, and it was a great conversation. It was Mark Maron's 1500th episode. That's how long he's been around. So, but I mean, they really laughed through the whole episode. It was just a really authentic.
From what you got me to listen to from that interview, they definitely got along so well.
I loved their discussion around books because they both talked about their obsession with buying books, but not necessarily reading them. And
hopefully it makes you understand me a little bit more.
It does. I mean, I'm guilty of the same thing, but the idea of how accomplished they feel when they actually finish a book. And also Paul Giamatti talked about having these bookcases in his apartment and how he had this fear of a bookcase falling over. And apparently that was something that he'd read about but had fallen over and killed somebody. And then I thought about you and our friend Andre pointing out your record case. Yeah. We had a little...
Yeah, the 5x5 IKEA shelving that I have of records.
And he noticed that one of the...
He's like, you should really tether this to the wall. And I'm like, I don't know. That's beyond my handyman skills. He's like, I'll help you.
We'll just pick it up off somebody's dead body when it collapses over onto them. Yeah. I don't know.
What a way to go.
It's been that way for quite some time. I feel like the angle's good, but perhaps we should tether it before Jeff gets killed by his own records because it's poetic, but I don't want it to happen, really.
That's true, yeah. It would be very poetic, and I don't want to go like that.
And if it happens to a guest, there's probably some liability issues there, but
Maybe it's because we don't live in a blue zone. That's how I'm going to go. I don't know.
Death by records.
Death by records.
So with listening to Paul Giamatti, I got a little bit on a kick of wanting to watch, well, first off, his new movie, Holdovers.
Yeah, I've been at you to get to watch that since well before Christmas.
And what was fascinating is he had another movie that was mentioned, that Mark Maron mentioned watching once or twice a year. So I'm like, okay, if somebody's watching a movie that frequently, you got to check it out. It was an old movie, Giamatti's in it, and it's called Sideways. And I'm very impressed with myself because I don't usually pick up on this artsy sort of thing, but immediately when it started, I said, oh my goodness, this must be the same director.
I'm impressed with that, too.
As the Holdovers. And it was. The director's name's Alexander Payne, and the style is very unique. But I picked up on it.
I wonder if he had any involvement with Billions, because, I wonder if he just does everything that Paul, is involved with or tries to be,
Paul is an amazing actor, and
he really is.
And he realizes that he's typecast quite a bit, but he just embraces that as, part of who he is now. And
I think it's because he's just such a likable person.
Well, exactly. It's I find when you listen to people on podcasts being interviewed, you get it depends. Some people are able to put on a show. They are actors. Yeah. But when you get somebody in full-on laughter, sometimes the conversation's a little more authentic and you can pick up on it.
Yeah.
So let's get to the topic at hand. So I first want to talk about the Ikigai. You're going to pronounce it better than me, Jeff, because you spent time living in Asia.
Ikigai?
Ikigai. Okay. So that Japanese concept is generally the idea of living a life worth living and knowing your reason for being. So very much similar to the concept of what the French might call your raison d'être.
Raison d'être, yeah.
Right? So, why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here on this earth? So I read an article by Ashley Macy. It was on Brit.co, so I just want to give credit there. And she was talking with some Tokyo researchers. The researchers actually wrote a book, and it's around the Japanese secret to a long and happy life, very much a focus on this concept of Ikigai. And the researchers are Hector Garcia and Francesc Miralles. And they really spent a lot of time in Okinawa, which is a Japanese island. And I think probably a lot of people are familiar with it because it is very well known as being the land of the longest living people. There have been many books and documentaries specifically.
They do things right there.
They do things right. And so people want to figure out, why do they have the highest life expectancy in the world on this island? And what are they doing? So this, is really what the concept of the book was. And we're going to talk about 10 things. So we'll do a little crash course on it in this episode that the researchers pulled from the time they spent living with the people on Okinawa.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. Sound cool?
Sounds really cool.
This? And the idea of Ikigai is finding a balance between your passion, mission, profession, and vocation. And it really involves this crazy, awesome Venn diagram. So I'm going to have to share that one on social media because I just love myself a good Venn diagram.
Oh, yeah, me too. I can't get over how amazing they are. It's the best thing ever.
And it's one of those things you really can't describe in audio, so that's why I'll have to share it.
Yep.
So let's get into the 10 things. And some of these I don't think you'll find surprising.
Honey,
but
what's a Venn diagram? I love them.
I love that this.
I love them because you love them, but like, what is it?
I love that this came up faster than the wicker discussion in a
Yeah.
previous episode.
Yeah, it's like, do you even know what a Venn diagram is?
It's when things overlap. So, for instance, I'm trying to think. Maybe if you picture, usually it's 3 circles, but say you had 2
now
circles
I
that
know.
overlap. Maybe it's a circle that says
Now I know.
things you love overlaps with things you're good at.
They're pretty heavy things.
And those would be things that maybe it's an idea of what you should do for a living.
Right. So if there's 3 circles that overlap, there's like, okay, this is the main thing in the circle, but there's a little bit of this, and then that's a different color.
Well,
that kind of thing. Yeah,
Well,
I've seen
there's
those.
essentially a subject in each circle, and where they overlap are the things that those 2 subjects have in common.
Would you say the yin and yang is a Venn diagram to a degree?
No, I would not say that.
No, that's not even close to it. There's a little bit of evil in the good, and a little bit of bad. And, anyway.
Yeah, that's more about the idea of balance,
Little bit
but
of
they're
good and
very.
evil.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say that they complement one another, but
Well, now that we're crystal clear on what Venn diagrams are, why don't you continue with the podcast?
well, the picture is worth 1,000 words, so we'll go with that.
Okay.
Which is about how many words I just used to describe Venn diagram.
Yes.
So, the first thing that people do to live a long life is to stay active, we know, and don't retire. I found this really fascinating.
Can't wait to retire, though.
Well, but I mean, retirement looks different for different people. There are a lot of people who I've noticed recently retire, they spend some time, maybe on the golf course and traveling around, and then a year later they're thinking, I actually want to get busy doing something.
Yeah.
And that may look like going back to work part-time. It may look like starting their own business in terms of consulting work. It could be simply doing volunteer work in the community and sort of taking on that community
That's right.
service role. So, there is the need for a lot of individuals to keep themselves busy, but sometimes people have hobbies too, and that's what their retirement looks like. But what's fascinating is that the researchers noticed that there's actually a lack of a Japanese word for the concept of retiring.
Oh, go away. That's interesting.
So, and the reason is because if you're doing something that you love, so if your work is something that you truly love, that you should do it as long as you can.
As long as you want to.
Make it a priority to stay active in it in all stages
Whereas
of
in
life.
Western cultures, it's like, as soon as you can get away from doing any kind of work, that's great. Really?
Well, it is. I think it's, when you think of retiring, it's sort of that idea of, okay, now it's time to think about me.
Yeah.
What does Amy need? Now it's my time to be selfish.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we think about with retirement, right?
You're right, but you do have to fill that time with something, because you can't just sit on the couch and watch television the rest of your life. You really do have to find something to do. So I can understand that. I bet you there's a lot of people who retire and then they get to the point where they're like, whoa, I actually don't like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people have hobbies and they have nothing to do with their work. So there are people who do a job that they love. They're fortunate enough to have the work they do be something they love. Then there are people who just do work because they need to make a living and, to basically support themselves, their family. And maybe the hobby that they love is not something they've ever been able to turn into an income. So in retirement, then that hobby becomes what keeps them busy, but they don't need to rely on a source of income at that point.
That's right. It's you just de-stressify what you love to do.
So it's not the idea of retiring as in stopping doing things. Because when you think I'm retiring for the day, what does that mean? I mean, it means you're going to bed.
To sleep.
You're going to sleep,
Yeah.
right? I guess the thought is, you stay active in Japan up until, end of days, I guess. You stay busy, contributing, doing what you love.
Yeah.
So I really like that. When I started reading this first tip around staying active, I thought, okay, this is just talking about exercise, which is, of course, important. But no, in this concept, it's really about just staying active in life and doing things. So the second thing is to take it slow. So it's the idea of leaving urgency behind, and by doing that, life and time take on a new meaning. So not rushing daily tasks, but just really trying to savor and enjoy them.
Yeah, like enjoy sweeping that floor. Make sure you get every little tiny morsel. You know?
Morsel, so that's the assumption that it's food.
Oh, there's food on the floor in everybody's kitchen. That's usually what's swept up from
Yes.
cooking and whatever. But
I know, there's always that little edge underneath the cupboard.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some modern genius kitchen design doesn't have that little spot where all the food finds its way.
There's a question I've always wanted to ask you, because it relates to this. It relates to sweeping. You've never really enjoyed sweeping. You don't like sweeping.
Oh no, I hate it.
But why? I don't
I just don't
understand where
find
that
it
fear.
thorough. I find
not
it-
fear, but
It's the end point. It's the trying to get it into the dustpan, and there's always that little fine line that you can't quite get into the dustpan. And then you have to keep
there's ways around that.
you have to keep moving it around and sweeping, and then there's always a little bit. I like a good vacuum. I understand there's a purpose for both, but
What if
I
you
enjoy
swept
vacuuming.
and then just vacuumed that little bit at the end?
Well, then you've got two things that are involved in the process, and that's just inefficient.
Okay, all right, but it just gets the job done, and you're not supposed to be hurrying.
Oh, well,
You're supposed to be relaxed throughout all this.
well, see, I didn't know about Ikigai when I was
That's why you
detesting
should
my
revisit sweeping.
And they often show, don't they often show monks and temples doing sweeping as sort of
I think.
meditative exercise?
Yeah, or just they're maybe just doing their chores
Well,
like everybody else.
Or that, but and doing it mindfully.
Yeah.
I also feel like sweeping kind of just moves stuff around, it puts dust in the air, depending on what you're sweeping, you know.
You do know though that it cleans the floor.
Well, yeah.
Just joking.
But again,
does.
if it's light stuff, it floats up into the air. Like if
Yeah.
you know, we don't have a pet at the moment, but if you have like little fine pet hairs and you start sweeping, they can float up into the air. Whereas
Yeah.
a vacuum just sucks them out of existence.
Okay, now I know why you dislike sweeping. I never really knew that. I remember you were just like, I don't want to sweep. So I
Sometimes
do
I
sweeping.
just don't want to sweep.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you know what? It's as much as I hate trying to find the best vacuum in the world, even a bad vacuum is better than the best broom.
Yeah, there you go. Even there's something for a T-shirt. Even what is it? Even the best.
Even the world's worst vacuum is still better than the
Any
world's
broom.
best broom. Any
Yeah.
broom. There, that's a good way to shorten it. I'm going to need a really big
Well,
T-shirt.
you might want to do a meme on one of our social media things to promote the podcast saying that.
It's like the whole, you know, even bad pizza is still good.
Yeah, that's true.
One thing I
actually.
do enjoy sweeping is outside with a push broom, like doing the sidewalk.
Oh,
Or
you
some-
do enjoy that.
Well, when you have a push broom on like a rough concrete surface.
Because all that dust is just going up into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So, no
as
big
long as
deal.
you're, you know, upwind,
Yeah, away from
the dust.
Yeah, away.
As long as the wind is blowing in such a way so as not to get
We don't
dust
know
in
which
your
way the
eyes.
wind's blowing here. We until
long
you're
as it's not-
outside, you
long as
just don't know.
As long as the dirt isn't in your face, I'm all
Right.
for sidewalk sweeping.
Right.
It's satisfying.
Which oftentimes happens.
And you know why it's satisfying? Because I don't need to use a dustpan at the end of the chore. I just sweep it.
See, I like that little challenge of trying to get that tiny little line of fine dirt into the dustpan. Because you know what you do? You just turn it, right?
But you never get it. It just keeps getting infinitely smaller.
No, you do get it. You
There's
get
some
it all.
analogy that would be equivalent to this, where like if you kept dividing something in two, and it gets smaller, but you never get to.
It depends on
Nothing.
how close that rubber lip on the dustpan is to the floor. That's the thing. We're getting into physics here now. But if it's tight against that hardwood floor, and you take your broom and you try to sweep it,
It's never going to be tight enough. There
Well-
will always be. It will exist.
I don't know.
There will
about
be
that.
some thickness to it, and when where that thickness exists, the only time is if you were sweeping up something that was granular, perhaps, and the grains were larger than the width of that little plastic
Yeah.
lip. Then you may get every single one.
You
Like
know
if you
what's-
were sweeping up like marbles, well, that sounds like a nightmare. But like
Right.
non-rolly marbles.
Yeah, like
Rocks.
square marbles. Squarbles.
Squarbles, the less fun game from Hasbro.
Squarbles. Play some Squarbles today. They don't roll very well, but it's fun. No, but another really interesting thing that I learned when I was like really young in my early sweeping days is this whole podcast on sweeping, by the way?
No,
sweeping
that's
the floor?
okay. It's...
Okay. But when you are, gathering up all your dirt, you don't put it all in the middle of the floor and then try to sweep it up. Because if you do leave a film of dirt, like you say you always do, it's right in the middle of the floor.
So you're admitting that you will leave a film of dirt?
No, I don't. I'm just saying don't put the dirt pile in the middle of the floor, because if you do, if you're an inexperienced sweeper like you, you will leave a film of dirt because you can't get it. You don't have the mental capacity to figure out how to get it all swept up with a broom and a dustpan.
Okay,
it can
but
be done.
Someone like you who's become a sweeping master after 10,000 hours of practice.
I learned in Okinawa.
You will sweep in the very center of the floor because you have complete confidence that you will leave not a grain of
that's not what I'm saying.
filth.
I still don't do it because it's just not a good practice to do. What if you're having a lazy day? You leave that little bit of dirt film in the middle of the floor rather than sweeping your whole dust pile over to the side or behind a door.
So now I know what's going on. Now I know.
What do you mean?
I need to look behind doors when you're sweeping because this is why it doesn't bother you. You just do that final little line of dust. You just sweep it away into a corner somewhere.
No.
That's why you're not frustrated.
Wrong. I sweep it up. I sweep it all up. I get all the dirt. Even that fine little dirt you ignore.
So that was all about taking it slow. And savoring.
No, it wasn't. It was a diatribe on sweeping and non-sweeping. That's what we just covered. And dirt piles.
Okay. Number 3 is don't fill your stomach. And I love this one because it has a popular Japanese phrase. The reason I love these phrases because I have to look up how to pronounce them, and then Jeff listens to them so that when I mess them up, he can help me. But this one is around the Japanese concept of harahachibu.
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 You got it.
Which means...
Like I'm some kind of professional at this stuff.
Well,
harahachibu.
The concept of harahachibu is to fill your belly to 80%. Again, the idea is less is more when it comes to a long life. So eat a little less than your hunger demands. But I have so many questions with this.
I know. I wish there was an alarm you could set so that you could figure out, like, ding, 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 you're at 80%, stop eating.
I know. I picture, like, if my abdomen was transparent and I could just have little lines that mark my stomach and it'll say, okay, now you are at the 80% mark.
It's so easy to go above it. It must be an art form just to figure out when you're at 80%.
This deserves an entire podcast episode around this whole concept because I find it fascinating. I know the idea of not eating till you're overfull. Like you don't want to be uncomfortable, but how do you know when you're only 80% full?
The problem with that for me is like, when you look at the world, so North America, like Canada and the US, it's portion control. If they give you a giant amount of food to eat, you're going to eat past 80%. But like we talked about before when we were in France, they only gave you enough to like, it wasn't like a huge portion like in the US and Canada. It was enough to eat. They didn't give you like a big mound of fries. They gave you like 15.
It's as though they want you to feel as though you're getting your money's worth. So they give you a lot of something that's probably a low cost item, but then you don't want to create food waste.
But how much, that's what I was just going to say, how much of that is wasted, We watch these television shows and we watch people eat and they just literally take like 2 or 3 bites and they waste.
All of these reality television, they're too busy concentrating on being filmed to eat.
Yeah, it's astonishing to me how much food they waste. I'm sure that the crew for the show just finishes it all up as soon as they leave the room.
Well, Anthony Bourdain used to do that. Remember, he would share food with the crew, and they would show it.
Yes.
He would invite the camera.
But he couldn't eat everything that was offered to him.
Oh yeah, I mean they would come with like 20 courses, wanting him to try all their different food. I don't blame them.
But I think to me, that is the quintessential thing about eating only 80% eating 80% full. is you don't have that food in front of you that goes beyond your 80%.
But I mean, I can eat till I'm not hungry. Is that 80%? Because it's like someone
No.
saying, here's a bucket full of water. You can't see how much water's in the bucket, but keep pouring until there's only 20% left.
Yes, the way I
can't
understood-
tell. I'm blind. I'm blinded to how much water's in the bucket. So how do I only time I know is when there's no more water coming out.
The way I understood it was like 100% is full, correct? So 80% would be just before you get full. Like, just before.
But how do you know? Because then
Because what you know when you walk away from a meal and you're like, oh, I'm so full.
But they only want you 80%
No,
full, not when you're feeling full.
It goes beyond when you're hungry. Like you're hungry, you eat, and then you find. I think I could find that like 80% threshold where you're like, yeah, that's it. I don't need any more, because otherwise I'll be really full. To me, that's really full. If you get to 100%, that's really full.
I feel like I need to take a pizza and then cut it up into slices and then eat enough slices so that I'm full, and then count those slices and then reduce that by 20%. And then in future meals, I'd be like, that's the quantity of food
Let's
that
do
I
it.
need
Let's order a
to
pizza
fill
right
my
now.
stomach. That is 80% capacity for my stomach.
That's a perfect way to do it, honey.
There.
Let's get
Okay.
pizza right
I
now.
find
And
that makes me feel
do it.
better. Number 4, surround yourself with good friends. I like this one. The idea, the researchers say, is that friends are the best medicine. Confiding, sharing stories, getting advice, having fun.
gossiping. Everybody
It's
gossips.
a little toxic, but yeah. But just having, people you can confide in is an important piece. For a lot of people, just getting into the groove long after the pandemic was a thing.
Yeah.
Getting used to going out into groups, and a lot of people develop social anxiety during that time and are still working to get rid of it. So number 5 is get in shape for your next birthday.
Get in shape for your next birthday.
So the idea with this is, of course, exercise, and that, your body needs to move and be active in life. You need some gentle daily maintenance. And in Okinawa, that it's not necessarily about performing rigorous exercise, but just being regularly active and, moving your muscles. Going for walks.
Yeah.
I always think of the Tai Chi in the park.
Yeah.
You always see those images when they talk about, Okinawa or the blue zones. But the idea that they specified for your next birthday, I found very fascinating, because it was just a different milestone than what we would traditionally use, like New Year's.
Yeah.
Or a special event or vacation or summer, like those types of things. But they really focus it around birthday. So the idea, I think, is
annual.
thinking about your life.
Yeah.
And that idea of health span.
That's really smart, actually. That gives a really nice flavor, to want to do it. An impetus to do it.
Well, so if you're thinking, you know what, my goal is to get, when I turn a year older, my goal is to get in better shape than I am now for when I turn a year older.
It's funny
so I
that
actually feel younger when I hit my birthday.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I like the idea.
It's funny because when I was in Korea teaching English as a second language, all the little parks around in the neighborhoods, they all have these, outside gyms, where you could do chin-ups and stuff like that. And they're never, ever, that I saw anyways, filled with younger people. It was always older people who wanted to, keep themselves limber and stuff. And they were really going to town. And
Well, I remember those even being, we were on a beach it was like on the Mediterranean in Spain. And they had a whole setup directly on the beach for people to do that. And they're starting to pop up here in our area. Well, they have been for a few years. I don't know how well they're utilized, but hopefully that, is something a trend that'll continue.
Yeah.
Number 6 is to smile. So, it's a privilege to be in the here and now, to be in a position to be able to be positive. So no matter what life throws your way, a lot of times a smile can lift your mood and lift the mood of the people who are around you. And
It's exactly true. I'm smiling right now. Can you tell, listeners?
I often get people will comment on me smiling, or just or I've had people ask me, of course, what are you smiling about? And I'll talk about, sometimes it's almost accusational.
You're like, oh, I
was
love
up
my
to something.
husband. I was just thinking about him. No, I was joking.
But it is my default. They talk about
Yeah.
with babies, how important it is to smile at babies, and they'll learn to smile back at an early age. And I think, our son is very much a smiler too. And going through life, moving through life that way, I think it just spreads positivity.
I think it does too. And it's just, how can it ever be a bad thing to smile? Have you ever heard of anybody saying, I don't like that person, they smile too much?
Yeah, well, maybe not to their face.
Yeah, that's true. There's during the
rather-
gossiping sessions they have with their friends.
Number 7, reconnect with nature. So the idea here is that human beings are made to be a part of the natural world, so we should return to it as much as we can. Make time out of our schedule and get back into nature, whatever that looks like, a hike or just a stroll through your neighborhood. If you
That's
live
something
in-
I've definitely gotten away from in these winter months and stuff. But I mean, there's no reason for it. You can do it in the winter. Even as a family, we could all go out someplace and enjoy.
And there
nature.
are no mosquitoes in the winter.
No mosquitoes
And no ticks.
No sweat. Right, you just cooled off, so it's
Right.
nice.
Well, you can sweat if you overdress for the temperatures.
Well, okay, technicality observed.
All right.
How many of these are there, honey?
There are 10.
Okay.
There are 10. Number 8
So-
is to give thanks.
Give thanks.
Give thanks for everything that makes your day a little bit better, and just appreciate being alive. I mean, gratitude journals have been something that people have talked about for years, but I think just even taking a moment here and there to be thankful for a roof over your head, food on your table.
Absolutely.
Good health. I mean, I have a practice of when I finish working out, taking just a moment to be thankful for my health, the health of my family, and the health of my community.
Including
Because-
me?
Yes.
Thanks.
You fall under the family category.
Okay, cool.
So, and then I expand to the community, which you also fall under.
Yes.
But really, I
So you're
think,
giving thanks to me only? Huh, thank you.
again, there are people who would love the ability to be able to get up and do a workout.
Mm.
And, and people who may be ill, or even the next time you have the flu, sometimes you think about, I'm going to really appreciate the next time I don't feel like dog crap. And so
We've all been there.
it's just taking a moment, and it takes a second. It's usually how I finish when I'm doing exercise. That's how I finish it off.
One of the biggest times I ever felt that was when we both had Norwalk bars.
Oh my gosh. Thank God we had 2 washrooms. I'll just leave it at that.
Anyway, that was so bad.
Yeah, Norwalk was bad. All right. Number 9 is living in the moment. So, a lot of times we're always looking ahead, and that can create anxiety. And looking in the past can create regret. So
Yeah.
living in the moment is a great way to stay positive, reduce stress level, and just help with living a longer life. And also, today is all we have. So, make it worth remembering.
It absolutely is.
And the last one is about actually finding your Ikigai. So, what is that passion inside you? And again, these are words from the authors directly, this section. Passion inside you, what's the unique talent that gives meaning to your days and drives you to share the best of yourself until the very end?
Wow, you're doing great there until the very end.
Till the very end.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is, no, but you know what? That is true. It doesn't have to be the bitter end. It's
No.
just the end. We all have an end.
And here's a fun little word that I learned as we finish off. Snug. Do you know what a snug is?
A snug? You mean snug as a bug in a rug?
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
exactly it. It's a snug. According to a Wall Street Journal article I read, it's a special room that's basically intended for comfort. So it's a British term. There's basically been a move toward these open concept homes and,
Yeah.
open floor plans that are just sprawling, and they can also be a little bit noisy. So a snug is creating a small, comfy, den-like space where...
Like a record room.
Where television isn't necessarily the dominant piece of the decor.
And records
but-
are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or just, maybe it's a place that you sort of just
Let's do it.
curl up and, and read a book, or
True.
It's the idea of having a smaller space within your abode, within your home, your flat. But basically, it's called a snug. And because it was called a snug, I just needed to know more about this.
I did not know that either. We have to do a whole podcast just on snug alone. I love it. I love the idea.
And to snug alone would probably be the best way to spend time in a snug.
Really, though, like if it makes sense to have a designated spot to just completely relax.
Yeah, to cocoon.
Not just on your couch.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's what I've got for living a longer life, for Ikigai. I found it interesting. I hope you folks did too.
I did not know about this concept at all before this podcast, and now my life has changed, and we hope your life is. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.
Be sure to check out past episodes and subscribe to keep up with what's new.
You can find us anywhere you get your podcast, and why not leave a review?
You can also follow InfoQuench on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Till next time.